Cheers. So the coffee's nearly gone. It's just a bit cold, so 45 minutes, I suppose it would be. So where did I get up to? I've talked about the maybe I should talk about painting it or whatever, but I've got to try and sort of. It's quite difficult to relate the difficulties, because the difficulties were daily. A lot of them were tied up with the bailiff arriving at the door because of unpaid bills and all that sort of shit, which was extremely embarrassing. I used to feel like a pariah when I went down to bloody Waipak to do anything, or Takapau and whatever, and so, we had zero support from the locals in terms of business, really. There were a few things that they did. Most of our financial support came by way of people coming to stay and whatever. But anyway, and so I know what the part of the story I'll tell now. So there we are. We're in this house. We've got a lease, right? And I've been stupid enough to let a whole lot of bloody people that I knew from the city come and stay with us. One of them was a girl that had been on the game down in Wellington. I met her when I was driving cabs, and she looked like such an innocent, but she sure as hell wasn't. Well, she had been down to the local pub, and my family were all there. She used to go to the local pub from time to time. I imagine she's the sort of person who would fucking walk to the pub as long as she got there. But anyway, and she was about 22 or something. Don't know, doesn't matter what her name was, she'll know. If she sees this, she'll recognise her name. If she's still alive, which is doubtful. But we were having it was the first New Year's Eve party that we had for the family, And so we had 30 people there, and people were stacked in bedrooms all over the place, all family members. My granny, my grandmother McDermott. Well, I mean a McDermott. She was there. She would have been in her 80s or something. And sitting in a chair, we sort of looked after the lovely old thing. And my mum and dad and sisters and brothers and spouses and children and whatever. A whole lot of family people, and some family people who were not able to stay in the house, so the house was chocker. And it was New Year's Eve. And around midnight, I'm engaged in trying to feed people and sort of keep the party going. I don't drink. If I had, one or two beers in a night, that'd be all I ever have. And I hate beer, don't like beer. I'd rather drink wine, but most of all, I'd like to drink vodka with vodka and tonic with a big lemon in it. But, one of them is all I would have. And so, I'm trying to look after everybody. And while I'm in the kitchen, 45 people arrive at the front door. And I come out in time to see them all streaming in. And they enter the Bavarian room. The Bavarian room was the ballroom, that one with the fancy ceiling that we looked at. So I'll show you again. I'm lost in this pile of pictures. There it is. Underneath that ceiling and those fireplaces and whatever, all these fuckwits from Takapau, people, sheep shearers and shitheads and deadbeats and whatever, who had nowhere else to go but the pub on Saturday night. You know what on New Year's Eve. You know what they'd be like. And so my brother was there, my brother Rodney, who was a fucking lunatic. But anyway, he loved pubs and he loved scrapping in pubs, but whatever. But anyway, the whole place erupted into a brawl, and I walked into the room, and I heard this. Mike, who's dead now, Mike Moore, who was married to my cousin Lexi, he came in and he said, "You better come into the Bavarian room." I was in the kitchen. So I went into the kitchen, I went out to the Bavarian room, and I looked in there. Now, you got to remember, I lived at night time for a long time. I've seen a bit of stuff. The whole room was going, and in amongst it all was sitting there in a chair my grandmother, and these people were beating the snot out of each other. They were fighting our people and their people, and my mother was in there and my father was in there, and I was fucking so angry. And I went away, and I thought, Jesus, I can't deal with this just by running in there and getting punched over. So I got a broom. And there was one guy who was sort of doing quite a bit of damage, And so I thought I got to stop him. He looks like the ringleader. And I walked in, I grabbed a broom and I went in. People cleared out of my way, and I swung the broom at him, I'm an idiot. And I thought, I can't hit him with the head of the broom, I might kill him. So I hit him with the handle of the broom, which meant it broke around his head. But it knocked him ass over kite, and then I got knocked down, and so I had some guys on my back, and I was on the floor, and I got the pointy end of this broom handle because it's sharp now because it's been broken, and I could see his legs, so I shoved it up between his legs, used my elbows, and I put the sharp end of that thing up in his crutch and lifted him off the floor with it. Fuck knows what damage it did to him, but some of them ended up in hospital. And so then somehow or other I fought my way back to my feet, and then I followed some people out into the hallway, and there were these three Maori brothers, Ketties was their name. Their father was a very gentle man who lived next door to us. But anyway, they were there, and I didn't know who the hell they were. They were just three Maori guys, big Maori guys, and I started remonstrating with them in the hallway because I just wanted these people to fuck off. And one of them laid me out from behind, sucker punched me in the back of the head, knocked me unconscious. And so, when I came to, I was actually trying to crawl up the stairs. And my brother-in-law, Nigel, he had stepped in, he's a big guy, he stepped in to stop them from giving me a kicking on the floor. So, pretty unsavoury people. But so, this did nothing for our reputation in town. I called the police. The police arrived, of course, a New Year's Eve brawl. And you call the police from Waipukurau, they're busy with the people in the main street. You can forget about the police. You're in the Wop-Wops. And you've got a brawl with fucking 60 people going on, 40 of them, whatever. And it was a horror show. We never, I never really got over it. And, so it kind of set the tone for a whole lot of what happened there in the future. And I'm going to go back to, I got to go back and try and give the history of the homestead again, because I sort of, there was this business of Christopher Rolliston's death. It's very important to this whole deal. Christopher Rolliston was, like I said, he was going to be the, they would never have been stupid enough to let back, what do you call them, house raiders or whatever you'd call them, into their house, and people would have stayed away because they had more respect for them. The locals had no respect for us at all, none at all. And my message to the locals, didn't have much respect for you guys either, got to say, because you stepped back and said, some quite decent people said, oh, it's just the local boys having a bit of fun. Fuck you. You farmers who thought that, shove it up your ass. And so, but anyway, go back to and I'm going to say that sort of thing from time to time because I'm so earthy. But anyway, let's go back to the history of the homestead. Christopher Rolliston dies. They've got to decide what to do with the homestead. So the family have decided to give it to the Catholic Church. So it is bequeathed to the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church were there for a while with the nuns in it. They give it back. So now, when they give it back, it's 1972. And so the beneficiary is 20. So I figure she's not reached her majority because she was born in 1952 and late 1952. And so she's probably 21. And so she's only 20. She might have been 19. And so Kevin Mackay is still in control of the trust, but he knows she wants to knock it down. Because who else is deciding to knock it down? There's only two entities that can decide to destroy a building like that. The owner and the trust. Kevin Mackay was on the trust. So what did he do? He put this 55-year lease on it, gave it to Colin Baxter. Then we come along and bought it 3 years later. So we come along in 1977, actually, early 1977 we took it over. And so Kevin Mackay, in his own way, I believe, was protecting us because he knew that if we went, the homestead went. And I believe now, looking back and trying to figure it all out and examining all this and sort of pulling the entrails out of it, I believe that he had a loyalty to Mrs. Rolleston. Mrs. Rolleston, that building was important to Mrs. Rolleston, which is why that she'd passed it on to the Catholic Church. Because, she thought that they would look after it when the trust probably thought they couldn't afford it, because they would have to pay top dollar for everything. But you see, when I came along, I come along and I got to paint it. He's on me to paint it. I talked about that before. So I did it off a fucking extension ladder with free paint from Resine. Thank you, Resine Paints. Aside from the fact that it was a bloody good product, and it's still there today, because I painted it twice with Resine paint, and the second time, the paint you see on ORUAWHARO Homestead today in 2022 was the paint that I put on it in about 1995. The second time I painted it. So I did it all off an extension ladder. The health and safety would be horrified. Wobbly extension ladder. But I'm careful. I'm not stupid. So the place got painted, and I'm still there. And Kevin Mackay's argument to get rid of me has less efficacy, if you know what I mean. And he always, every time I used to go and see him quite regularly. And he was always very nice to me. Do you know what I mean? He would sit there and chew the fat with me in his office. Some bugger's probably paying him $300 an hour for me to sit there and talk politics with him. But because, my little bit of business would have taken about a minute. But I bet he put that in the book to the trust for $300 or whatever. Wrote it all down, blah, blah, blah. And so I sort of felt quite comfortable with him. And so then, and this is just about the history of the homestead, not the history of us. So then we go through until 1999. And I'm still there. But, one of the things that happened after that big brawl is that I couldn't walk for a while because I'd damaged my foot. And a local potter who I'd met, he'd turned up, and I told him I used to do sculpture as a kid. So he came along and gave me some bags of clay, and I started becoming a sculptor, and that kind of changed the thing. But that's another story. But anyway, so I'm by this time I'm making a bit of money as a sculptor, selling ornamental stuff that was made at the homestead, which is a whole other story. And in 1999 they took court action against me to get rid of me, and it sort of blew me away that they did it. But I kind of realised now that I believe that probably what happened is 1999 was a kind of a refreshment date that had been built into whatever the agreement was with the trust, and the fact, and so the trust might have reverted back to the beneficiary or something in that year. I don't know. But anyway, they took me to court, and they spent $460,000, and of course they won. I mean, I actually went into that court case with $3,000 against 460. You got fucking no show, eh? But I said to Kevin Mackay, when they served the papers on me, he didn't, but the bailiff did. I took the papers and I read them, took the papers, made an appointment, went in and saw him, and I put them on his desk, and I said to him, I'll remember it for the rest of my life. I said to him, you're going to win this case against me because I have not got the money to fight it. But I said, I am going to fight it. And I said, the trust will win, but they're going to go away with a bloody nose. I was angry. I was disappointed in what he had done because obviously as the chairman of the trust, he was sort of the apparent instigator of it. But he'd just be doing the bidding of the beneficiary. And so we went through the court case. I lost, and the bailiff came round to throw us out. And in fact, the first we knew that we had lost was when 2 or 3 security guards turned up at the door to guard the place. And the bailiff turned up to tell us we were got to get out. So we had to immediately it was a drizzly day, immediately get all of my furniture, whatever, my everything I owned out of the studio, out of the workshop, out of the house, out of all the bedrooms, knives and forks, bloody cups and saucers and all that sort of shit. So I had to move all that in one day. So, and a whole lot of people started to gather around. And I've got to say that a whole lot of people walked off with a whole lot of my stuff, because I decided I'd rather that some stranger had it than the bloody trustees, because they didn't deserve it. So, I got away with whatever I was able, and it all had to go into storage. And I've jumped ahead again. And so while we were doing that, I'm out on the front lawn. I'm going to stop this in a minute with this perler. I'm on the front lawn, and up the driveway is coming a car, flash car. And out gets two people I knew, Kevin Mackay, that lawyer for the trust, and the manager of the station, whose name I can't get to come back. Manager of the station, the manager of the sheep station. And I thought to myself, geez, he's bought that guy to protect him. What does he think I'm going to hurt him? I'd never hurt anybody. Certainly not a man sort of 20 years older than me. But anyway, so, and because, I had a grudging respect for Kevin Mackay, because I did sort of feel, I didn't quite understand what the hell was going on over all those years. I didn't really know what his place in the great scheme of things, but I think I know now. and he said to me, he walked up towards me, extended his hand, I shook his hand, and he said, I don't want there to be any hard feelings between us, Dennis. Yep. I'll say it again. He shook my hand and said, I don't want, or it might have been, I hope there's not going to be any hard feelings between us, Dennis. Or between you and I, Dennis, something like that. And I was gobsmacked. I couldn't believe that the man would say that after he's just taken me through an extremely and very costly, traumatic court case. But, he obviously didn't, it seemed to me, I was blown away, he obviously didn't really feel that he was completely responsible for what had happened. And I didn't sort of realise that till later, because I reckon the beneficiary was the person who pushed that court case. And he said, I wish I had listened to you. It was a fairly short conversation. He said, I wish I had listened to you when you came to my office and told me that we would go away with a bloody nose. Because we have certainly done that. Because this court action has cost us $460,000. So, we were thrown out. We're out. And the end of this part of the story will be, I've jumped around a bit. But so, a couple of years later, after this guy, Peter Harris, had taken over, he had managed to contact me in Wellington and asked me, next time you're up here, come and see me. So I went and saw him. And I talked to him about the building, because I knew the building intimately, which I'll talk about that in the next segment. And so I knew it because I just had to look after it for 24 fucking years. And I worried about it every day. I mean, that was what I did for 24 fucking years. That's half of your working life. I did that and made sculptures. And I did a bit of writing then, but much more now. And so he said to me, I was interested to know how he bought it, because we had offered them $370,000 before the court case to buy it. They turned us down. In fact, they didn't even respond. And he said, I did some research. I discovered that they had a bill for $460,000 to Simpson Grierson. So he said, I wrote them out a check for that amount of money, sent it to them, and told them that I was going to be overseas, and that if they wanted to, they could cash it, and the homestead was mine. And he said, when I came back, the check had been cashed. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But what is true is that that's what Peter Harris said to me. But, Peter Harris is, he kind of embellishes and changes stories a bit, I've got to say. And, I've got quite a bit of evidence of that, and I'm going to talk about that soon. But anyway, so that's the basic history of the homestead. And I realise now that Kevin Mackay had prevented that court action all the way up to 1999, which I believe must have been some kind of signature date in the life of the homestead. And then he could no longer do anything about it. And so that's when it ended. And that'll end this little segment. I'll figure out what to say in the next one.